When the name Dracula is uttered, it often evokes images of dark castles, shadowy figures, and a creature of the night who feasts on human blood. The figure behind the infamous name of Dracula was no fictional vampire, a real historical figure who lived over 5 centuries ago and whose life was far darker and more brutal than any story could convey. That man was Vlad the Impaler, the true Dracula. Our journey to understand this historical figure begins in the heart of 15th century Eastern Europe, in a land called Wallachia, a small but strategic region nestled between the kingdoms of Hungary and the mighty Ottoman Empire. In 1431, in a city named Sighisora, a boy was born who would grow to become one of the most feared men in history. His name was Vlad III, later to be known as Vlad the Impaler, or simply Dracula. Vlad's father, Vlad II, was a man caught in the political turmoil of his time. Vlad II was inducted into the Order of the Dragon, a chivalric order created to defend Christianity against the encroaching Ottoman Empire. It was from this title that the name Dracula was derived. Dracal meant dragon, and Dracula was the son of the dragon. This title was an honor, but it would also later be a mark of fear, as it tied Vlad's legacy to both chivalry and brutal violence. But Vlad II's reign was fraught with betrayal, danger, and political unrest. The region of Wallachia was caught in a tug-of-war between two mighty powers, the Ottomans to the south, who were aggressively expanding their empire, and the Kingdom of Hungary to the north, which sought to control the region for its own political gain. In this environment, Vlad II was forced to navigate a delicate balance between loyalty and survival. In 1442, Vlad II's enemies turned against him. The King of Hungary, seeking to exert more influence, betrayed Vlad II, and the family was forced into exile. Vlad II's sons, Vlad III and his younger brother Radu, were taken to the Ottoman court as hostages, a common practice to ensure the loyalty of defeated rulers. For young Vlad, these years would prove to be formative, shaping him into the ruthless figure he would become. At the Ottoman court, Vlad was not treated as a prince, but as a pawn. He was exposed to the cruelty and manipulations of the Ottoman Empire, where alliances shifted in the blink of an eye, and treachery was always a step behind. For a young man raised to expect power and respect, these years were a harsh lesson in the realities of survival. The Ottomans took advantage of the family's weakness, and the two brothers became pawns in a deadly game of politics. It was during these years that Vlad's hatred for the Ottomans began to grow. He saw firsthand the brutality of their rule, and as he witnessed the rise of Sultan Mehmed II, the future conqueror of Constantinople, he grew more bitter and resentful. His younger brother, Radu, became close to the Sultan, even adopting the ways of the Ottomans. But Vlad, filled with fury and a sense of betrayal, could not reconcile with his captors. His mind began to form a dark resolve to reclaim his father's throne and punish those who had wronged him. In 1448, at the age of 17, Vlad returned to Wallachia, determined to take his place as ruler. But the situation had changed drastically. His father was dead, murdered by his enemies, and the throne of Wallachia was not easily obtained. The boyars, the powerful nobility, were divided and fragmented. Vlad's ambition burned with intensity, and he knew that to secure his power, he would need more than just military might. He would need to instill fear that would shackle both his enemies and his subjects into submission. Vlad's most notorious method of punishment was impalement, an execution technique so grotesque and cruel that it still horrifies to this day. Victims were impaled on long, sharp wooden stakes, left to die slowly, often for hours or even days. Their agonized cries a powerful warning to anyone who would dare challenge Vlad's rule. It is said that Vlad made a habit of impaling entire villages, leaving their bodies strewn across the land in twisted, horrific displays. This was not just an act of punishment. It was an act of terror, a psychological weapon designed to break the spirit of his enemies and reinforce his absolute authority. One of the most chilling examples of Vlad's brutality involved a group of Ottoman diplomats who arrived at his court. They refused to remove their turbans, an act considered a grave insult to Vlad. In response, he had their turbans nailed to their heads. The humiliation was symbolic of the scorn he held for the Ottoman Empire, and this small incident would become one of many that cemented his reputation as a tyrant who would stop at nothing to assert his dominance. But Vlad's cruelty didn't end there. In 1462, Sultan Mehmed II, the ruler of the Ottoman Empire, sought to crush Vlad's resistance once and for all. He marched his massive army into Wallachia with the intent of defeating the Impaler. What happened next would become one of the most infamous chapters in military history. Vlad, outnumbered and cornered, used his military cunning to turn the tide. He poisoned wells, burned villages, and launched sudden and devastating attacks on the Ottoman forces. But it was his use of psychological warfare that struck the most fear into the hearts of his enemies. As the Ottoman army advanced, they encountered the Forest of the Impaled, a terrifying sight of 20,000 impaled Ottoman soldiers, their bodies left to rot as a gruesome warning. The sheer horror of this display caused panic among the Ottoman ranks, and the Sultan, terrified by the sight, was forced to retreat. Despite his temporary victory, Vlad's reign would not last. The Hungarians, who had once been his allies, eventually betrayed him. Vlad was captured, imprisoned, and spent years in captivity. Though he would return to the throne for a short period, his time in power was never stable, and his legacy would be forever tainted by his brutal methods. Vlad the Impaler was more than just a tyrant. To the people of Wallachia, he was a hero, a defender of his land, and a man who fought to protect his kingdom from the growing threat of the Ottoman Empire. For them, Vlad was a symbol of resistance, strength, and defiance against foreign invaders. Outside Wallachia, however, Vlad's name spread as a symbol of terror. The Ottoman Empire gave him the nickname Kazikli Bey, meaning the Impaler Prince. His brutal methods were the subject of whispers and horror throughout Europe. And it was this fearsome reputation that would later inspire one of the most famous characters in literary history, Count Dracula. In 1897, Irish author Bram Stoker published his novel Dracula, a gothic masterpiece that would forever entwine the name of Vlad the Impaler with the figure of a vampire. While Stoker's Dracula was a fictional creation, historians and scholars have long speculated that Stoker was inspired by the real-life Vlad, whose life of violence and intrigue was eerily similar to the legend of the vampire. Today, Vlad the Impaler remains a controversial and complex figure in history. In Romania, he is still celebrated as a national hero, a symbol of resistance against the Ottoman Empire. His memory is honored in monuments, legends, and the stories passed down through generations. Yet, to the wider world, he remains a figure of horror, a tyrant whose methods of cruelty earned him the title of the true Dracula. His life is a testament to the complexity of human nature, a man who was both a protector and a monster, both a ruler and a villain. Vlad the Impaler's story is a chilling reminder that history is never as simple as the legends that follow. It is a tale of a man driven by vengeance, a man who ruled with an iron fist, a man whose life became so entwined with myth that the line between truth and fiction is almost impossible to discern. Vlad the Impaler, the man behind the Dracula legend, a figure who has been feared, revered, and mythologized. But through it all, one thing remains clear: his legacy endures, haunting us to this day.